When Joe was murdered, a major contributory factor to that was the kind of debates we were having.
You are speaking to and ministering to some of the most influential and powerful people in the country.
I actually don't believe that politicians have really understood the impact of their words.
Mandela and Tutu, they were people who looked like me, you said.
If they endured so much and yet they could sing and dance and smile, then I can too.
Can you tell us a little about the adults in your life?
I have forgiven my mother. In 2019, I got my opportunity to reflect back to her some of the abuse that she meted out to us. And she told me that she didn't remember.
Were you ever tempted to kind of sugarcoat, paint over some of the harder bits to tell? This podcast is supported by Stewardship, helping Christians be the best stewards of the resources God gives them.
Radical generosity has always been central to the Christian story, and stewardship can help make it part of everyday life.
For decades, Stewardship has helped Christians give in ways that are simple, flexible, and deeply rooted in faith. They help you give well and see your generosity make a real difference.
A stewardship giving account gives you one place to manage all of your giving, regular and one-off, available 24/7.
You can set aside funds for future giving, respond quickly when urgent needs arise, and see clearly how your generosity is making a difference over time.
Discover more at stewardship.org.uk.
Hello and welcome to another edition of the Re-Enchanting Show. I'm Justin Briley.
And I'm Belle Tinsel.
And this is the programme where we aim to re-enchant an arguably disenchanted, materialistic post-Christian culture with the Christian vision of reality. We do it with all kinds of different guests from week to week and season to season. And what a joy it is to be joined this week by Bishop Rose Hudson-Wilkin.
Hello.
Hello. It is such a joy. So just, if you have not bumped into Bishop Rose in your life yet, let me do an introduction. So Bishop Rose Hudson-Wilkin MBE is Bishop of Dover and Bishop in Canterbury, and she is an utter trailblazer. She is the Church of England's first black female bishop, was the first female chaplain to the Speaker to the House of Commons, and was a chaplain to Queen Elizabeth II. She is also the author of her autobiography, which we will be digging into, The Girl from Montego Bay, in which she shares her story with raw and unflinching honesty.
Welcome along to the show, Bishop Rose. Wonderful to have you with us.
Good to be with you.
Well, we're going to cover a lot of ground on the conversation today, but our first question for every single guest on the show is always the same one. It's our signature question. What books are you currently reading?
Well, normally I'm reading a whole variety of stuff, usually in relation to perhaps an engagement that I'm going to do. But something that I'm reading, which is not for any engagement, is Jeremy Hunt's MP. Jeremy Hunt's latest book, which is Can We Be Great Again? And I was intrigued by it, of course, because we had a certain person across the pond whose main chant was Make America Great Again. And I remember when that first started, saying out loud to others, as well as to myself, well, when was America great? You know, was it when it took the land from the native Indians, destroying so many of them? Was that when it was great? Was it great when it enslaved Black people, taking part in the transatlantic slave trade? Was it great when it strung people up on trees to show how powerful they were, etc.? Exactly when was it great? And what is the greatness that they want to rediscover, as it were? So when I saw the title of the book, I was quite intrigued by it. Can we be great again, you know? And I guess one should ask, you know, it depends on how we define greatness. What is this great thing that you believe you did, that you want the world to know about, and you want to go back there again, to revisit and be that again. So I must say that I do have some admiration for Jeremy Hunt. He was in Parliament when I was there as chaplain to the Speaker of the House of Commons. And one of the things that I can't bear with politicians is politicians behaving badly. And I must say that I have been impressed so far with him and reading his book in terms of not trying to be unpleasant about someone else. I don't think what we see of PMQs mostly are politicians behaving badly. They're always trying to take someone down, and and I find that so hard.
Absolutely. And what was it like when you were in that role of chaplain to the Speaker of the House of Commons? Did you sort of see the more humane side of the politicians outside of the debating chamber, as it were?
Oh yes, you do, and I did challenge a number of them with their behaviors, and they would often say, "Oh, it's all theatre. Afterwards we go to the bar and we have a pint together." And I say, "But actually, the people who are watching you, they don't know. I know you go and you have a drink together or supper together, but they don't know that, And I've always said that Joe's death, when Joe was murdered, I believe that a major contributory factor to that was the kind of debates we were having. And I actually don't believe that politicians have really understood then and now the impact of their words on others outside. I really do believe that they must take some responsibility for the way she died. Our words have meanings, and people carry them to extremes. But I've been very impressed with him so far.
Good.
He writes a letter to Sir Keir Starmer, and I was beginning to cringe when I thought of reading it. What is he going to say? I hope he's not going to let me down and say horrible things. And he didn't. It was really constructive what he said. So I'm impressed.
I have two questions off the back of that, which aren't on our script, but this is just such a good conversation already. Script's already gone out the window. Firstly, how would you define greatness, therefore? Because actually thinking about your role as it was then, that must have been so at the forefront of your mind. You are speaking to and ministering to some of the most influential and powerful people in the country, people who, for better or for worse, think of themselves as great, And so how would you define greatness? And the other question I was thinking as you were speaking is, friction can be a good thing. Echo chambers are not healthy. So what does healthy friction look like?
Healthy friction. The thing about pearls, that it becomes what it is from the rubbing together, and that's friction. That's friction. That's healthy friction, because something beautiful comes from it. So I think that having healthy debates are important. If you watch the film Conclave, in it, the administrator, right towards the beginning, he said, certainty is the enemy of unity. And I remembered in the theater when I heard that saying, yes, that is so true, certainty. And for so many who profess faith too, they think, I am right, and you've got to do what I do or say what I say or think what I think. And it is the enmity of unity. We need to recognize that other people have different views to the ones that we have, and be willing to listen. We may at the end of it still not agree with their point of view, but at least we have listened, and we have listened respectfully, and we have disagreed respectfully. I often think of a husband and wife who wants to continue in their relationship. They come from different parts of the country, different cultural backgrounds, maybe different countries for that matter. And for the sake of their lives together, they're going to acknowledge, actually, I don't agree with what you have said about this, but we're still going to love each other, and we're still going to walk together because we inhabit this home together, and we have children or we have families. So, yes, we're going to show them that it is okay to disagree and to be polite and respectful and loving to one another. So I think friction, healthy friction produces pearls, beautiful pearls, that we can adorn ourselves with, whether as earrings, which I love. I did wear my pearls today, or in other ways. With regards to greatness and what I consider as great, um, when the disciples asked Jesus, who is the greatest? Who is the greatest? And in our world today, we are obsessed, and there are certain politicians, either here or across the pond, who fancies themselves as the greatest, the biggest hitter, so to speak. Jesus took a child and said to the disciples, if you want to be great, become like a child. Become like a child to be great. And I think what Jesus was signifying in terms of greatness, it is about trust, it is about care. A young child believes that they're going to be fed, that they're going to be clothed, that they're going to be loved. And even in cases where you have parents who are abusive to their children, that child is still trusting and hoping. So for me, greatness is not about using our weapons of destruction and reducing countries to rubble, as we see happening all around us in Ukraine, in the Middle East, in Myanmar, in Sudan. It is about being able to trust. It is about being able to hope. It is about living and patterning something different and carrying people with you towards that goal. It is about compassion. Those for me are the emblems of greatness.
You're very helpful. And perhaps we'll return to that theme a little later on as we talk about some of the things that you've achieved in your own life, but how you look at them in the light of that pattern, as you say, of what it means to be great. Could you paint a little bit of a picture, just as we begin, about your childhood in Montego Bay, the surroundings, the things you love, maybe some of the things you still miss? You do a great job of painting that picture in the book. It'd be great to hear it from your own lips, though, Rose.
When I'm at school with especially primary school children, I say to them that when I was growing up, bored was not a part of my vocabulary. Which our children and grandchildren use so easily because we were poor. We didn't have stuff. But the one thing we had the yard
Mhm.
outside. We had trees to climb. We were creative. Our parents couldn't afford toys. I remember when my mother sent a parcel back once that had dolls in it. I mean, we kept those dolls going, even if it was missing a leg or an arm after many years. That was the only doll we ever knew. We didn't get dolls. We didn't get toys. No one gave you anything for your birthday, you know? So you had to be creative. You had to find bits of usually things that were discarded.
Mm.
Elastic bands, you would pick them up and you'd make. That would be your ball or your cricket ball for
Mm.
that matter. Old tires that were thrown away became a useful thing that you could put a stick through and wheel. And,
Mm.
the earth that was tough and dry and partially broken, that became yams that we sowed in make believe shops that we did. So it was all very creative. And we
Mm.
loved it. We didn't have time to sit and think, oh, I haven't got a new doll or I haven't got the newest iPhone or anything like that. We just didn't. We used what we had around us. Bits of cardboard, we would build a shop or build a house. And perchance we would create the extra rooms that we didn't have.
I'm so fascinated by the title that you went for your book, where it is The Girl from Montego Bay. And because you are layered in so many sort of garments of success and achievement. And, your identity is so deep and rich and multifaceted. Everything you've done, everything you've been, every title before or after your name, like all of it. But it seems to me that with this autobiography, and therefore maybe just internally as you move around the world, stripping all of those things off, you get to like this core. Can you tell us a little bit about what it is about being the girl from Montego Bay that is still fueling your identity even now?
I think for me, it was beginning with nothing,
Mm.
beginning with nothing, and being at ease with oneself. There's a lovely poem by Waring Cooney that says, "She does not know her beauty. She thinks her brown body has no glory, but if she could dance naked under the palm trees, then she would know. But there are no palm trees on the streets of England, and
Mm.
dishwater gives back no images." So for me, there is something about not starting one's life with accumulations of stuff and stuff and stuff, but beginning with something quite simple of oneself, and oneself as known by God and loved by God. But what is interesting, the title of the book, I'm not sure if you have read how I came by that title. I came by that title because when I was appointed as chaplain to the Speaker of the House of Commons, there was quite a furore about my appointment. And so the role came with canon of Westminster Abbey and uh, and rector of St. Margaret's Church. Now, so there were those three components to the role. 97 people applied for the role. 6 of us were shortlisted, 4 men and 2 women. And at the end of it, 2 weeks had gone by after 2 days of interviewing process. And after 2 weeks, I learned that Westminster Abbey thought that I was not right for them. And Mr. Speaker, however, thought that I was right for them, for Parliament. And so the press had a field day because they could not agree. The job was split, and so Westminster Abbey chose another person for that bit of the role, and Mr. Speaker chose me for the parliamentary bit of the role. And so the press had a field day. The press accused Mr. Speaker of being politically correct.
Mm.
Thankfully, they didn't have the word woke at the time. Although I
Yeah.
must tell you that when it's used by our politicians and by many, it's used incorrectly. But that's another story.
Mm.
So they accused him of being politically correct. So not only did he not employ or appoint my colleague who got the other half of the role. After all, this is a role that's been in existence for over 300 years, always occupied by a white male. Um, and so they wrote in one of the newspapers, they wrote two columns. One column describing my colleague who got the other half of the role, in which he was described as the Oxford graduate. And then the column describing me, no mention of the fact that I too had a degree from Birmingham University. But instead, my column described me as the girl from Montego Bay. So Mr. Speaker was being politically correct. He did not appoint the Oxford graduate who, by all accounts, had accomplished X, Y, and Z. Instead, he had chosen this girl from Montego Bay. And I remembered being very angry when I saw that. But almost as quickly as I was angry, I remembered thinking, one of these days, I'm going to write my autobiography. And when I do, what you don't know is that you've given me the title for my autobiography. So hence
Oh,
the
come on.
title, The Girl from Montego Bay.
Yes, that's phenomenal. It's been rehabilitated in the most beautiful way. I hope the journalist who wrote the column is in your acknowledgements, just as a little side eye. Can you tell us a little about the adults in your life when you were a child? You paint such rich pictures of them, really honest, really raw pictures of them, of your parents, of your aunts. I enjoyed Aunt Pet in particular, your sister, Shirley. Could you just tell us a little bit about those adults?
Yes. Well, my mother left when I was 2 years old to come to the UK. And there's nothing unusual about that. Many of my generation, will tell you that their parents left. They either went to America or, they came to the UK. And so my aunt said that our mother left us with our father. And she assumed the responsibilities. And she apparently said, the man can't even look after himself, a picnic or look after. The man cannot even look after himself. How is he going to look after children? And so she assumed the role of looking after us, which, got my father off the responsibility that came with looking after children. And so he was present throughout my life, but he was not engaged. He would appear, he lived nearby, he would appear, and at one stage we lived briefly with him. My aunt was an amazing woman because she was also looking after another of her sister's child. So as well as that child, plus my sister and I, my sister Shirley, who is a little bit older than I am, and she did as best as she could. They were not rich or wealthy; they were poor. So we all shared in whatever small, you know, meager stuff that everyone had. We had it. I tell my children when they see me eating chicken wings or the bony bits of the chicken, Mommy, why are you eating the bones? And I said, darling, because when we were children, that's the bit that we got. Did you know in Jamaica they sold the backs of the chicken? And that's what we used to have. They would buy the chicken back. And that's all bone with little bits of meat in the corners. So I still find myself with the bones. And actually, if I have visitors and I cook a whole chicken, I'm hoping that they don't like the chicken wings and that, so that I can have it. So when they say, Mommy, why are you eating it? And I say, well, I used to have it as a child because we were poor. I said, but Mommy, you're not poor any longer. Why are you still eating it? And I said, because I love it. So they were caring in their own way, but we also have to remember that they too were products of their generation. So my father's sister, my father and his siblings, he had a brother and other sisters, they had been taken to Jamaica from Cuba by their mother, who wanted, I'm sure, a different life, a better life. You see, we behave here in the UK as if the movement of people is a new thing. Please get a life, get educated. It's not new. People have always moved. And as a matter of fact, when I hear people say, oh, they're not real asylum seekers or real refugees, they're economic migrants, I remind them that the British were economic migrants when it went all over the world, conquering left, right, and center. And actually, may I just remind them at this particular point, to all those who are listening, that we turned up, the British turned up in the Americas, in the Caribbean, in small boats too. They turned up in small boats. Yes, the large boats were out at sea. They turned up and colonized. So there's a great amount of education that is needed where that is concerned. But
Yeah.
anyway, so that in their own way, and life was tough, and so my grandmother, my father's mother, actually became mentally unwell and had to be put in an asylum, as they would have called it then in Kingston, and they never had any other contact with her. So in effect, they grew themselves up, and uh, and so as a child, no one ever put their arm around me in the family and said, I love you. I never heard those words. I love you were not words that were ever said to me. And looking back now, I can appreciate that those were words that they never heard themselves.
Wow.
My mother's mother was born 18 years after the abolition of slavery. So they would still have been experiencing the leftovers of all of that.
Yeah.
You know, so when I look back, I have to be thankful that I came through that. And there's an African saying, it takes a village to grow the child. And I'm grateful that within my church, people took that seriously. Because although you may have been born into that family over there, the whole community knew who you were. And certainly within the church, that was where I heard the words, I love you. That was here where I heard the words, well done, when you read a lesson in church or you did something. So that compensated for that.
Yeah.
And it meant I
Yeah.
had a balance.
And it sounds like the church in that sense became a very significant part, obviously, of your life. And I mean, to what extent did the community of the church and the message you heard there sort of help in terms of what was often a pretty difficult upbringing in lots of ways, all of the issues that you've mentioned that were going on around you? What sort of role did the church play as you started to grow into your teenage years and beyond?
Absolutely significant role. I remember, I was the child who wanted to hear the words "I love you," and I wanted to be held, and for someone to put an arm around me, and didn't have. So there were times in my early years where I felt unloved, uncared for. But looking back, the folks would have said to us, you ought to know that you are loved because you were watered and you were fed and you were clothed, and that should have been enough. But for some of us, it's never enough. And we've just got to know what it is that we think we're missing and how we find it. So for me, the church played a significant role. I was baptized as an infant at 3 months old, and so I refer to myself often as a cradle Anglican. And it was within the church that at Sunday school, that I learned John 3:16, for God so loved the world. And I remembered that making a huge impact on me. um, because I remembered thinking, wow, this God, this great big creator God, if he is interested in me, then I must be of value. And, so from the little girl who sang, I'm nobody's child, I'm nobody's child, just like a flower, I'm growing wild. No mommy's kisses and no daddy's smile. Nobody wants me. I'm nobody's child. Moving from that to, wow, I am
Mm,
loved by God.
mm.
I'm not going to let go. I'm not letting go of this.
Gosh, I mean, all of that takes an awful lot of unflinching, raw honesty to tell, though, as a story, and that's something about this book. It's, I mean, were you ever tempted to kind of sugarcoat, paint over some of the harder bits to tell? Why did you want to kind of lay it out there in this quite raw and unflinching way?
Yeah, you know what is interesting, and even as I hear the question that you ask, is that I was writing it for me,
Hmm.
and I couldn't lie to myself. I didn't think of an audience that I would be writing to when I wrote it. I was simply revisiting my life and recording it. That's what I was doing. I was putting it on paper. I was remembering the experiences that I had and noting it. That's what I was doing. And although on many occasions when I did speaking engagements, people have said to me, "Oh, have you thought of writing your book? Would love to read it." And I remembered smiling and thinking to myself, I don't think anyone would be interested in my life. There's nothing particularly significant about my life. When you've lived it and you've walked in it, you don't think there is anything exciting or it's just the life you've lived. So I didn't have an audience in mind that I was writing to. If anything, I was writing to myself,
Hmm.
and recording the experiences that I've had. Yeah, and so that's where I don't need to lie to myself.
Hmm.
Um, and I didn't share it with my husband or my big sister
Hmm.
until it was ready to be sent
Wow.
to the publishers, which was right towards the
Yeah.
end,
Yeah.
the end of it. And it was precisely because I didn't want their version.
Hmm.
And I remember when my sister read it, she said, "Rose, are you sure you want others
Hmm.
to hear this and to see this? Are you sure?" And at the time, I remembered thinking about it and thinking, "That's too bad. I've written it now. I'm not taking it back in. I've written it now. That is my story." And
This episode is brought to you by Stewardship, a Christian charity making generosity simple and intentional.
A Stewardship Giving Account gives you one place to manage all of your giving, regular or one-off, available 24/7.
Discover more at stewardship.org.uk.
Yeah, there was, as I was reading it, I was wondering if there's something about, because it's so raw and it felt costly to write this, like I read it thinking, cool, this is really cost you to write. But I was also left wondering, is it something about, were you sort of inspired and driven by the fact that even you were allowed to tell your story and your story had value? And I think what made me wonder that was there are some instances you write about when you're a child, particularly with your mum, where you would tell her the truth. And it was met with disbelief, met with violence sometimes. So it's like your story was, you had this thing that what actually happened, the way you saw things, the truth as you understood it, was somehow not allowed. And you also speak, and we've spoken about this before on the podcast, because I too saw this when it was there. You speak about a letter that was on display at Lambeth Palace Library. Yeah, from an enslaved
yes, an
young woman.
enslaved woman who had written to the Archbishop,
Mm.
Yes.
and it ended up amongst the Bishop of London's stuff.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And then there was punishment for
Absolutely. And I
writing that
remembered
story.
I'm sitting in a room where the author, who was writing a sort of drama based on that, and she was reading the content of this person's letter, and I just teared up and found myself crying. And And it suddenly connected with the fact that when we were children and we were living with our mother, we had written to tell our aunts back in Montego Bay how terrible we were being treated in Kingston by our mother, and we had written pages and pages, and we were so naive as children, on the outside of the envelope, as well as writing the who we were sending it to. On the back of the envelope, we'd put our names and our address. And I think it was too bulky in the envelope. And so we probably needed to have put more stamps on it. And so it was sent back. And we came home from school one day and discovered bits of paper torn up in the yard and realized that it had come back home, and clearly our mother had read it and tore it up. And oh my God, we were waiting for that beating. We were waiting for that beating. We never did get that beating. So whether or not it touched her and she realized, because it was after that she sent me back to Montego Bay. But I remember listening. I was sitting in Lambeth Palace in one of the rooms, listening to the letter being read and listening to the fact that she was punished, and it all just came flooding back at my childhood and that experience. Yeah.
Yeah, I can totally imagine. So it's something to do with the fact that your story is worth being told. It's, you know, your truth is not something to be punished for. It was it also, because you say you wrote the book for you. So was that healing in that way?
Oh yes, and actually, only at the end of August I recorded it for Audible, and it was the first time that I was reading it as a whole, because I'd write a chapter, and I wouldn't go back to it again. I'd done that chapter. Then I would write another chapter. Then I would sort of write and correct and write and, and so it was the first time that I was reading the finished product. And I had, there were a couple of times when I teared up and had to stop. Had to stop reading it, and just recompose myself.
With all that said, and what an extraordinary thing to be able to write and read and have others hear the the honest, vulnerable reality of the life growing up there, Rose. It seems that you also deeply admire, and you talk about Mandela and Tutu and others, the idea of resilience as well. Can you tell us why that's important to you, and in a sense why you don't want to be perceived as a victim, quote unquote? Talk a little bit about that, if you would.
I remember as a child growing up admiring Nelson Mandela and Desmond Tutu, because here were two people who looked like me. And there was also Martin Luther King, who was killed in America. But I remember these two South Africans who looked like me, who were being told that they were of no value by the way apartheid had treated them and continued to treat them. They were right there in the world. The word were, we were crying out, "Free Mandela." And then Mandela is freed, and Mandela is standing tall. He's not sort of hunched over and feeling sorry for himself. Yes, he has lost many years of his life incarcerated. And I remembered his words that he would fight for this, even if it meant violence. But, because he believed in it. And then there was Desmond Tutu himself, too, who, as a young boy, would have seen how his people in effect were being treated and etc. But whenever I saw these two men, they had joy. They had joy. You know, you may kill my body, but you cannot kill my soul. Um, and that was wow, wow. I want some of that. I, you know, it's we have all these sort of various pop songs. I will survive. Yay! Hey, yes, I will survive. But I will not just only survive. I will thrive. And so for example, verses like John 10:10, I am come that they may have life and have it more abundantly. I take that seriously. I
Mm.
really do take that seriously. So, so for me, it is important not to pretend that I didn't have these catastrophic, life-changing experiences as a child. I don't pretend, but I am not going to be held back there.
Mm.
And why would I want to hold these people who abused me
Mm.
in front of me every day, and to remember them and to be enraged each time? Well, I don't want to be that person, full of anger and
Mm.
that's not who I am. That is not who I am. And so I when I speak about the sexual abuse, if you notice, that was right at the end of the book, because
Mm.
I hadn't even thought of putting that in the book. And it wasn't until I was speaking to the WI, they'd invited me to speak to them, and had told my office that they didn't want anything religious. And I remember
Wow.
thinking, how can you invite a bishop and not want to have anything religious? But anyway, I was going to go along because they were in my diocese, and I like going to
Mm.
speak to, within my diocese. And when I got there, the person who met me in the car park as we walked back into the venue, she said it at least 2 or 3 times. Oh, please, nothing religious. And again, I'm feeling a little bit irritated now, thinking, why on earth do you ask for a bishop if you don't want anything religious? And so when I stood up to speak, I said, I gather you don't want to have anything religious. So I think I'm just going to share with you about my autobiography, which I'm writing at the moment. And it was while I was telling them and talking with them about it that the sexual abuse actually just sort of came in front of me. And I remembered it. And I had to stop. I had to stop and again recollect myself. And then I said to them, something has just come up in front of me, which I hadn't even thought of including in my book. Well, I guess I'm just going to have to tell you. And I,
Wow.
and I, and I shared it. And I shared it. And at the end of it, when people were asking questions, they said, how is that possible? That can't be. You could not have had those experiences, and yet you're standing in front of us. You're sane. There's nothing wrong with you, and all those things. And how is that possible? And so the faith that they didn't want to hear about in the beginning, they got to hear about it because it had to be my faith,
Mm. Mm. Mm.
When I say the Lord's Prayer, and I say the Lord's Prayer at least twice or more times per day, forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. Is it easy to forgive? Absolutely not. But I have to choose whether or not I stay there in that place of abuse. I have to choose whether I keep this person who committed that abuse and hold them constantly. No, no, no,
Mm.
no. I have forgiven my mother as well. And I did in 2019 got my opportunity to reflect back to her some of the abuse that she
Mm.
meted out to us. And she told me that she didn't remember doing any of those
Mm.
things.
Mm.
And, um, she is my mother. She gave birth to me. And I have huge respect for any woman who gives birth. It is a painful experience, guys. You'll probably appreciate that you missed that experience. But so yes, I have forgiven her. She is my mother. I love her. What I am aware of is that I don't have I don't have that emotional bonding with
Mm.
her.
Mm.
Now, I'm not surprised that I don't have an emotional bonding with her because I was a baby. I'm looking for the words that I wrote in her book. I was a baby when she left at 2 years old, so I have no memory of her. And when she came back, I was 9, and and then there was all that brutality from her. So there is no emotional bonding with her, but she is my mother, and I
Yeah.
respect this woman who has given birth. And I in the book that I sent to her, I've put in it to the woman who gave birth to me.
Wow.
Uh,
Wow.
and yeah.
It's a testimony to the fact that there can be healing even in the most traumatic circumstances, Bishop Rose, and sometimes it's about laying something down, not because we follow a Christ who was willing to do that on our behalf, and in whom we can leave all of that trauma. It doesn't mean it didn't happen. Doesn't mean that that justice shouldn't be served in very often.
Absolutely.
But there is a way in which we don't have to let that consume us either, and that is
We
what
don't have to be
forgiveness.
consumed by
Yeah,
it, and we don't have to carry it on our
yeah,
backs.
yeah,
And it
yeah,
is a
absolutely.
choice that we make. It is a
Yeah,
choice that we make. And for some people, it will be difficult. I'm not underestimating the difficulty that it will be for some people to lay things down. I am just very grateful to God
yeah.
and very grateful to my faith that it has enabled me the freedom of letting it go.
Alongside those more harder and often harrowing accounts, there is of course much good and fun and humor actually in the book as well. And you tell us a bit about Ken, and the what happened, especially when you came together and he proposed, because that's quite a story.
Yes. Well, I met Ken when I first came to the UK. I was 18 years old, and I came to the College of Evangelism, the Wilson Carlisle College of Evangelism, because women were not allowed yet to be priests, to be ordained in ordained ministry, but we could be part of the church army. And he was a year ahead of me, studying at the Church Army College. And he said that he remembers the day I arrived because he helped to take my case from the vehicle. I have no recollection at all of him that day.
So it wasn't love at first sight for you then?
It wasn't love at first sight,
Poor
no.
Ken. Sounds like it was love at first sight for him.
But he then we had to pray. My first year group had to pray for the second years who were having their assessment as to whether they could continue the course. And I prayed for him. I actually wanted to pray for 3 others. The first one had an eye um, difficulties, impairment with his eyes. But by the time I got the list, somebody else was praying for him. And then there was 2 other people that he hung out with, and their names were already gone. And I thought, well, who am I going to pray for? And I thought, what about the guy who plays the flute? And sometimes he plays the guitar. Yeah, I think I'll pray for him. And then I met him the next day or so in the administrative block and said, "Oh, by the way, I'm praying for you." So that's how we became connected. And he actually invited me to stay at his home, his parents' home. And apparently he had gone home and told them that there was this Jamaican girl who, she was poor, she had nowhere to go, and his parents said, "Of course, we've got spare room here. She can come here for Christmas." But then his sister saw us holding hands in the park.
Busted.
So she went home and said to her folks, "I think there is something more to this than just the poor girl with nowhere to go." So our relationship grew from that. And when I finished, I went back to Jamaica. When he finished before me, he went up to Hartlepool to work. But he then came over to Jamaica. He followed me out to Jamaica, and we got married. And we communicated by letters. But we had this thing where I have no recollection of him ever proposing to me.
This is so funny.
I know. How on earth did we come to be married? And when I asked him about it, he said, "Well, if you can't remember, I'm not going to tell you." But when we had our 25th wedding anniversary, he went down on one knee and he sang the Barry song, "You're My First," my everything, and proposed then. So at least I have that memory, but I have no other memory of him ever proposing to me. And we've been married now for over 42 years.
Oh.
Ah, there you go. So maybe that's the secret. No romantic gestures, and it is the key to a long and happy marriage. Oh, I love that. I love, as soon as Ken made an appearance in the autobiography, I'm a hopeless romantic, so I just loved every detail. Can I ask you, as we have already mentioned a few times, you know, you were the first female chaplain to the Speaker of the House of Commons. You were the first Black female bishop. You know, you're such a pioneer. You are a trailblazer. You are a ceiling shatterer. And I was just wondering if you could tell us about the joy that comes with being the first so often, but also the cost that you have found that also comes with being the first person to hold these roles.
I mean, on a whole, I would like not to be the first on a
Of
whole.
course,
And
yeah.
the reason why I would like not to be is if when you are the first and everyone talks about you being the first, then it means that it's not normal.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's what it means. And I want it to be normal. So the cost for me is about there is no space, there is no place for mediocrity.
Ah, okay.
So that is something I don't know about others, but that is something that I have instilled in myself. Why? Because I want others to come. I want others to follow. And if I'm mediocre in what I do, then, for example, if if an establishment have had a white mediocre male doing something, when they come to reappoint again, they never say, "Oh, we've had one of those. We've tried that already." But if it's a woman, if it is somebody of color, then they'll say, "Oh, well, we tried. We had a woman before. Didn't quite work out, so we won't bother." Do you see what I'm saying?
Mm.
So I want it to stop being the first so that we can be normal, and be a part of the norm, what it should be, etc. But the cost is I overextend myself and I'm conscious. So when I was first ordained, I remembered having knee surgery shortly after that. And I got my husband to drive me over to the parish and leave me and then to come back and pick me up. I hobbled around on walking sticks instead of taking the 2 weeks off
Mm.
and being healed. I hobbled around because I consciously remembered thinking, I don't want them to say, "See, I told you she's a woman,"
Mm.
or
Mm.
"See, I told you she's black."
Mm.
And so I'm consciously aware of that. Um, with my hand on my heart, while we continue to be the first, I suspect that I would still do that because I do want to have others come after me.
Mm.
And I don't want to be the only one in that space.
Yeah, it's difficult when you're feeling that compulsion to hold yourself to a different standard because you inhabit that role, that place. I could imagine that Archbishop Sarah Mullally is perhaps feeling similar things. We're recording this obviously a few weeks after the announcement that she has been made Archbishop of Canterbury. I suppose what do you sense perhaps she needs to hear as she faces obviously criticism and all kinds of feedback on such a huge public stage at this point? What would be your advice as a fellow bishop and an Anglican in leadership to her?
I think she already knows the importance of listening.
Mm.
But I would want to say to her, listen to your own soul. Listen to your own soul. Trust yourself and trust your soul. When we were children, we read a storybook of a man who was walking with his son and a donkey. And people came by and they criticized him for letting the little boy walk. Put the little boy on the donkey, so he did. Got further down the road, he is criticized. The little boy is criticized you've got this old man walking and you're on the donkey. So the little boy gets off, and the man, the older man gets on the donkey. And then further down the road, he is criticized again. Oh my goodness, this poor donkey. You know, how on earth you're riding, and this poor donkey must be tired and hungry. And so the next time we see the man, they, both him and the little boy, are carrying the donkey. So, so I would want to say to my colleague, Bishop Sarah, to say to listen to her own soul and to her inner person, and let that be the drive. Because in effect, I'm not actually listening to others when I set myself a high standard. It is about me. It is about me knowing the deal when it comes to black people in a predominantly white country. I have children here and I have grandchildren here, and I want them I want them to walk into a room. You remember, if you saw Hamilton, I want to be in the room where it happens, the room where it happens. I want them in the room, and I want them sitting at the table in the room. And if that is going to happen, then I know that I need to inhabit the room and set an example. I often say we see more black people in sports and in the art industry, the music industry. And that's because little children see themselves. They see reflections of themselves in those places. And that's why they think, oh, I can do that. I can be a footballer. I can be a sprinter, or do the 200 meters or high jump, etc. Because they see it. Seeing it. I know what's his name who.
In the same way that you mentioned, that Mandela and Tutu there were people who looked like me, you said, and that was integral to you feeling I can do this. They give me a model that I can aspire to as well.
If they endured so much, and yet they could sing and dance and smile, then I can too.
Just before we go, it's not that I want to get into the nitty-gritty of this topic, but I'd really value your wisdom on this specifically. So anyone who might be listening to this episode and they are enchanted by the Christian story, Jesus is attractive to them. There's something within them that is craving re-enchantment, and they're craving it in the Christian story, but they are thoroughly disenchanted with religious institutions. They might be drawn to the wildness of Jesus and then feeling repelled by the organizations that represent him. And it strikes me that if anyone would have wisdom on such a feeling, it might be you. And so I was just wondering what your thoughts are on those kinds of, to be honest, really fair feelings.
I think that I can think of churches now, for example, who teaches that women should not be in leadership. And although they say women should not be in leadership within the church, I suspect that deep down they also wish that women were not in leadership in politics, in engineering, in medicine, in all those different walks of life. I tell you, I would not like my children to be indoctrinated by that in that institutional setting. So for people who are repelled by the institution and some of the things that the institution is saying, you see, because the institutions can often be saying things that they don't live as well. And that's important. When we were children, our folks used to say to us, action speaks louder than words. Or show me your company and I'll tell you who you are. Or you lay with dogs and you're going to get fleas. There is a connection. So for me, I think that I would say to those who are attracted to the person of Jesus and what he brought, his compassion, his love, his forgiveness, his the way he embraced all of humanity. I was hungry and thirsty. You gave me nothing to eat or drink. I was sick and in prison. You did not visit me. I was naked. You did not clothe me. That's the thing that Jesus is interested in. Jesus isn't interested whether we pray 10 times a day or whether we genuflect or make the sign of the cross or whether we go to that or whether we stand on the street corner with a thing telling people to repent. Jesus isn't interested in that nonsense. What Jesus is interested in is how we live with those around us, whether we show compassion to the world, whether when we see what's happening to people who are trying to cross come to our countries in small boats, whether instead of saying, oh, we're going to stop the small boats and we're going to dismantle and emphasizing, they are criminals and all of that negativity, what Jesus would be asking is, why are these people fleeing from the places they're coming from? And what can I do? What can I do to contribute to a better life for all? We're brothers and sisters. So I would encourage those who are repelled by the institution not to force your way into that institution. Take up your bag, take up your cross, keep walking, and keep calling out to the Lord. The Lord hears, he will answer, and he will direct you to that place where you need to be. So don't give up now.
Really, really, really helpful words as we conclude today's show. Thank you for sharing so honestly and candidly about your own life, and also, helping us to think through some of these issues around the way we conduct ourselves in the public sphere as well. Something you've really set an example for as well, Bishop Rose. Really enjoyed the conversation today. If you want to get hold of the book, it's available wherever you get books from. The Girl from Montego Bay by Bishop Rose Hudson-Wilkin MBE, who's been our guest on the Re-Enchanting show today. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Every blessing.
Oh, Bishop Rose, you are a pleasure and a powerhouse, and we've loved every second.
Thank you.
And thank you to our listeners for joining us. If you want to make more episodes like this happen, then as usual, seenandunseen.com/give is where you can find all the information to do so. We will see you next time.